Look, the truth is that, and the evidence is overwhelming at this point, okay? Like, you can go through this. It is just pure science, pure facts and charts. All of the lockdowns, you can't point to any, you can't find any trend if you look at the lockdown states versus the not lockdown states, or the lockdown countries versus the not lockdown countries.
Patrick Bet-David has on Dave Smith and Chris Cuomo live on the PBD Podcast on the Valuetainment YouTube channel in front of a live crowd, actually. And things definitely take a turn between Dave Smith and Chris Cuomo live on the PBD Podcast when they get into it about this one specific topic in front of the live crowd. And let me tell you, Dave Smith just shreds Chris Cuomo into pieces and leaves him absolutely speechless over this one specific topic. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here where Dave Smith absolutely annihilates Chris Cuomo live on the PBD Podcast on the Valuetainment YouTube channel in front of a live crowd.
You're a smart guy, and I'm not condescending to you. I like what you do, and I like where you're coming from. It's kind of weird being a libertarian in our system. You know, you don't really have a home, but it does kind of give you an out whenever you want because you don't have to be part of the other two. But, you know, for me...
Yeah, I get to just be right about everything.
Yeah, you know, that's true. It's true. There's a convenience in never having to own any of the conversations. But what I'm saying is...
No, I mean, listen, Chris, I own my track record. I do a show 3 days a week. I've been doing it. I don't know how many of you guys listen to it, but I've been doing it through... I have a track record just alongside yours. I'll put my track record up there, and I'm very proud of it. So I do have to own something. I was out there in real time being against the lockdowns, being against the stupid mandates like outdoor mask mandate. It was so, listen, this stuff wasn't that, I mean, I don't mean to bring the conversation back to COVID.
Why do you think they did it?
But well, listen, hold on. But listen, forget even why they did it, okay? Because I have my theories on that, but I don't know for sure. I don't know what's in people's hearts and minds. What I do know is that saying something like, I'm vaccinated and I need to force you to get vaccinated so that you protect me was so profoundly stupid that the second someone said that, I was like, now that doesn't make any sense.
And I'll tell you what, you can look this up for yourselves. There have been multiple studies that show, first of all, just some basic things, right? Hospitalizations, 9 out of 10, once the vaccine came out, were unvaccinated people. That should matter, okay? Now, as you went through the iterations of the variants, should they have changed? Yes, 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 but it'll never happen. You'll never hear that where things stand today, because if there's no review, it'll never happen. But the idea of why you were supposed to take the vaccine was very basic. And what did we see as a result? Now, they'll throw numbers about how many people died because they didn't take the vaccine. I don't know about those numbers.
If you enjoy content like this, make sure to go ahead and like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel. It would help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
Mortality is a very tricky thing to pin down. You died with it, you died from it, I don't know. But here's something that really bothers me. Matching counties, right? Because, you know, kind of matching where people are, you're going to have some kind of general sense of lifestyle, okay? Republicans, unvaccinated, died in disproportionate percentages. Listen, I don't want it to be true. The data is what the data is. And there are 5 different studies on this. Now, die, again, is a tricky thing because, well, is there over-indexed for obesity, heart disease? But they were taking them from the same areas. And it bothers me that it became a politicized decision. And you can't say it didn't. That's what it was. All of these things became politicized. That's what pissed me off. I didn't go after Byron Donald because I wouldn't go after him anyway. I like having him on the show. I think he's a future of the GOP. I think he's a good guy. I think you guys should take a serious look at him in your state. But you just switched because it was a different president. That's all that switched. The whole dynamic switched. That was my beef about that. With the later variants, we really had mistakes made in this, in my opinion. Now, a lot of them will disagree with me and say that's not true. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not a scientist. It still did what it was supposed to do, and the boosters made up the lag. I don't know that that's true. And they are doing very little to find out what the vaccine is doing in people, and they're doing very little to find out what the virus is doing in people. And all the research that's coming out is saying those are our two biggest issues health-wise that we're dealing with.
Well, Chris, I really hope you read the book that I just gave you, man, because it destroys all of these arguments. Look, the truth is that, and the evidence is overwhelming at this point, okay? Like, you can go through this. It is just pure science, pure facts and charts. All of the lockdowns, you can't find any trend if you look at the lockdown states versus the not lockdown states, or the lockdown countries versus the not lockdown countries, the counties where there was mass compliance versus the counties where there wasn't mass compliance, the counties where there was more vaccine passports versus you can't find any trend in any of it. The truth is that the virus did what the virus was going to do, and none of these government policies did a thing to slow it down. But
you don't think that hospitalizations went down because of the vaccine?
Listen, read the book, man. I'm telling you. No, it's not a conclusive point. But what these policies did do is they destroyed the lives of tens of millions of people. And by the way, Chris, this is why there's so much anger about this stuff, okay? This is why people are so furious and why people do kind of want to see somebody, because listen, I give you a lot of credit for doing this. Like, I really am grateful to you for being on this stage with me here. The thing about it is like, I think from my perspective, and I really do think I speak for millions of Americans when I say this, this is all we get. You. Like, there's no one else. Fauci's never going to do a debate like this. None of the other top establishment scientists will go. Well, hold on. Let me just finish my point.
Dave Smith drops nothing but truth bombs here, and people just aren't willing to admit it and just take it as it is. The government's response to COVID was an absolute disaster, and almost nobody has been held accountable for it. From the start, he was one of the few voices questioning the logic of lockdowns, mandates, and forced vaccinations. And now that more data has came out, a lot of what he said turned out to be right, and you just can't ignore that. Dave's not saying COVID wasn't real or that it didn't cause any serious issues. He's saying that the way our leaders responded caused even more long-term damage than they're willing to admit. What makes Dave stand out is that he's not emotional about it. He sticks to the data. He talks about how lockdown policies didn't show clear benefits, how vaccinated counties didn't outperform unvaccinated ones, and how the real science never lined up with the way these policies were even forced on people. Meanwhile, the people who pushed those policies, many of whom are still in power, just move on like nothing ever happened. No reflection, no accountability, just silence. Dave's also right about something deeper. This wasn't just a medical crisis, it was a political one. Decisions were made based on who was in office, not based on actual science. You could see how quickly things flipped depending on the administration. And that's why so many Americans are angry. It's not just about COVID, it's about trust. And the trust was just broken. At the end of the day, Dave represents people who felt voiceless during all of this. The ones who didn't want to be forced into compliance without question. He's not trying to score political points here. He's just demanding honesty. And at a time where so many leaders dodge responsibility, that's the kind of voice that matters. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments.
There's my point. Yeah, because they're cowards and they're wrong. None of them will go on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? What did he end up? You remember the pot that was offered for that doctor who was like everyone chipped in? I think you chipped in for it. Yeah, like everyone's he would raise millions of dollars. They won't debate RFK. They won't do any of this, and so it's like, look. I think a lot of people are angry about this stuff. Now, back to the point you were making here, okay? When we're talking about specifically the vaccine passports, okay? This was during the Omicron wave.
Right.
We're talking late 2021.
Right.
There has been, at this point, you had almost 2 years of COVID hysteria, with the establishment being wrong about every single prescription along the way. And meanwhile, there's also mass censorship of any of the experts who come out against it. I mean, the Great Barrington Declaration, that happened in the fall of 2020. This is a full year later after that, after all these experts came out and said the government got this entire response wrong and ruined tens of millions of people's lives. But listen, if you look at, there's no question about.
They were seen as a minority group.
Yeah, but they were a group of experts. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, the ones who
I'm just
tell
saying,
the truth.
that was shot down.
If you look at what Omicron did, okay, this was after mass vaccination, okay? it tore through the unvaccinated areas and the vaccinated just alike. You cannot look at one chart and say, oh, look, this area had high vaccination rates, and therefore Omicron didn't really come in here and no, tore through it just the same as it did everybody else.
It tore through it in terms of cases, not severe cases.
It's not true.
Look, I agree.
It's not true.
I agree. Well, look, again, we can look at the data. You can put the data up. I mean, this is what I do. But what I'm saying is this. This
is what I do too, with a much better track record, Chris. I'm just being honest. This is the truth.
I don't know that you have a better track record. I really don't know that you have a better track record.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Right.
Do you think lockdowns worked? Did they cause more harm than good? By the way, there was no good that was caused, but do you think they caused more harm than good?
The correct answer is you can look again. I wish these things were that simple. Okay. I can argue yes, I can argue no. The government will say yes.
No, but I'm asking you.
The people who are in charge of Robert Redfield will say yes.
Do you think that lockdowns mitigated the virus and were not offset by the catastrophic harm that lockdowns caused?
That's a different question. And that's hard to know. It caused so much pain in this country that it's hard to say. How do you value what they believe was safe in terms of lives?
Go look at the Johns Hopkins study on lockdowns. They looked at all the lockdown areas versus the areas that didn't lock down. They found no difference in mitigating the virus. It was just the disaster. And I was against the lockdowns from the very beginning. I was against the ridiculous outdoor mask wearing. I was against all of the mandates, all of people being deemed non-essential, all of this stuff.
I get it. But it wasn't just America. You make it sound like,
I'm against it everywhere.
But what I'm saying is, but it matters that it happened everywhere. It matters, and it happened in other places longer. And in Sweden. Yeah, look at Sweden. How did it work out for them?
What? Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
Sweden, by the way, here's how it worked out for Sweden. Lowest excess mortality rate in all of Europe. That's how it worked out for Sweden.
They had rates of illness in there.
Yes.
And then they didn't build up the herd immunity they thought they were going to by going that way.
Okay,
and the UK wound up watching them and reversing course.
And why is it that Sweden has the lowest excess mortality rate in all of Europe? Because of all of the deaths that were caused by the lockdowns. That's why. They were the ones who didn't do that to themselves. And man, I mean, you look at, Pat brought up the number of small businesses that were ruined during the lockdowns. That's the least of it. And that's huge. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. But you're talking about suicides, families breaking up, children falling behind, just things that people will never, and not just that, but also just, look, here's the thing, right? And this is what I think the media class never really grapples with. If I were to ask you, what was the cost of the war in Iraq? Okay? What was the cost of it? Now, you might try to find what you go, okay, we spent $2 trillion on the war in Iraq. Okay, there were 1 million Iraqis died as a result of that war. Over 10 million were displaced. You could look at the thousands of America's bravest young boys who killed themselves, tens of thousands, if you want to count the ones who blew their brains out in the aftermath of it. Okay? But then you know what the cost of it was? Everything that we're living through today in our country. Donald Trump being president, the lack of trust in the corporate media, the culture war, everyone being pitted. Like, these things have costs for your society down the road that are impossible to measure. And the costs of the lockdowns, it's going to be another 15, 20 years before we look back and really recognize it. By the way, one of the costs of the lockdowns was the summer of love.
Dave Smith isn't just debating policy, he's holding up a mirror to how broken our leadership and media really was during the COVID years. While the establishment told us they were following the science, they shut down dissent, crushed debate, and punished anyone who questioned the narrative. And Dave's calling that out for what it really was: control, not science. When he brings up vaccine passports, lockdowns, and mandates, he's not guessing. He's referencing real world data like Sweden's success and the Johns Hopkins study showing lockdowns did nothing to stop the virus. But instead of engaging in real debate, the so-called experts just buried the conversation. What sets David apart is that he's not just asking what worked, he's asking what it cost. The media never talks about the suicides, the destroyed small businesses, and the kids who fell behind in school. The families that imploded under pressure, all of that gets swept under the rug. And Dave is absolutely right to compare it to the Iraq war, not because they're identical, but because Both were massive government failures with consequences that will ripple for decades. The lockdowns didn't just hurt people in the moment, they shattered trust in every situation. The media, the public health, education, and that collapse in trust is fueling everything we're seeing now, from political chaos cultural division. Dave's not being dramatic. He's pointing out that this wasn't a temporary misstep. It was a turning point. And while the people who made those decisions still refuse to answer for any of it, Dave's one of the few who keeps pressing the question, was it worth it? And more importantly, who will be held responsible? Let me know what you guys think about this video in the comments, and I'll see you guys on the next topic.